Now, most of you will probably know me as an entrepreneur, the entrepreneur who started the African Leadership Academy, a special boarding school in South Africa that aims to train the future generation of African leaders. We have several graduates from the academy who are actually working here in Mauritius now, like Miss Linda Rabiz over there. That's her when she was a student back in the day. And then, of course, there's ALU right here, which has started a campus in Mauritius called African Leadership College. We're building a network of universities all across Africa. And some of you have heard about African Leadership Network, which brings together mature leaders to connect them to try and promote prosperity for Africa. But have you ever heard about Global Leadership Adventures? This is another organization I started, which is based in San Diego, California, that finds young people from all across the world, and we take them to develop them as leaders in developing countries. We take them to developing countries for life-changing journeys during their summer holidays. This summer, we're taking about 2,500 young people to 20 sites across 14 countries for these journeys. Maybe you haven't heard of Synexa Life Sciences. This is a biotechnology company. They're based in Cape Town. We have 50 employees. And it's also something I was involved in starting about 14 years ago. Now, collectively, all of these enterprises employ about 500 people every year. We generate about $20 million in revenue. And we've raised about $150 million US for these entities. I like the sound of that, $150 million. I even prefer it in rupees, 5 billion rupees. That's how much we've been able to raise for these entities. So, never had a failure. All successful, all going on today. Different levels of success, but they're all great. Right? Okay, maybe not. There's one entity that you've probably never heard of that failed. See, about 6 years ago, I had this brilliant idea that I was going to be a fashion designer. The idea was personalized clothing, where you would get a tailor that would come to your house, and they would take your measurements, and then we'd send it off to a tailor that we had in China. This was for men only, right? Because men hate shopping, but they also want to look good. So I said, why don't we make a website where you come, we'll measure you, send your measurements off to this tailor in Thailand, they'll make what you want and ship it to your house. Brilliant idea. The start of the company, it was called FK Swaniker. This is the website. And so we launched it, and a few of my friends decided that they would sign up. So we had them get measured and everything. We sent the measurements off to Thailand to have the stuff made. A few weeks later, they arrived. They had all ordered suits. So they put them on. The jackets all fit very nicely, beautifully. Then they tried to put the pants on, and it was getting stuck. You see, the one thing we had overlooked was that the tailors in Thailand, even though they understood all the measurements, they didn't understand that in Africa, men have this. So the stuff just didn't fit. So let's say that was the end of that idea. And that's why that ruined my record. But throughout all these successes and yes, a failure, whether it's in education or in biotechnology or in educational travel, I've learned a lot about entrepreneurship. And so today, I wanted to share with you 4 stories and the lessons that I've learned about what it takes to be an entrepreneur. The first story occurred about 2 months ago. We were organizing the grand opening of the African Leadership University, first campus in Mauritius, and we're opening another one in Rwanda soon, and we wanted to introduce this concept to the world. We said we're going to have a big grand opening event in Mauritius. There's going to be 500 guests at the gala dinner, 200 guests coming from outside of Mauritius, international media, very high profile. Our Chancellor, Graça Machel, was going to be here. The President of Mauritius was going to be speaking. So I wanted to make sure that this thing was perfect. And there were about 7 students who were going to be speaking throughout the 3-day event. I said, I want to make sure that the speeches are all good. So I asked the person who was preparing them. I said, I need to see all the rehearsals. I need to see all these students rehearse before they speak. And he promised, yeah, sure, this weekend, we'll make it happen. This was about Tuesday. Thursday, I still haven't got an email about when these rehearsals are going to happen. Saturday, I bumped, I said, are we having this? He said, yeah. The weekend passes. I don't see any rehearsals. And the following week, of course, the event was actually happening. And I got very busy and, I said, well, I hope for the best. When the event actually happened, these students came out and they blew me away. Brilliant speech after speech after speech. This reminded me of one of the key lessons that I have learned as being an entrepreneur, and which I had forgotten when I asked this person to see the rehearsals. And the lesson here is that when it comes to entrepreneurship, the real secret to your success is not your idea. It's not the funding that you get. It's the people that you bring around you. People like Mr. Vera Sunasi. The only Mauritian who was on our team when we moved here with 40 people from South Africa to kick off this project. Now we're about 100 people and we've got about 15 Mauritians on our team. But he was the very first one who came with us. And he's a director of student life and is the person that I'd asked to train and prepare these students for their talk. You see, the lesson is that when you start something, you need to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, better looking than you, isn't he? Just look at him. And who are able to trust that they'll get the job done right. And that's what I should have done, that he was going to take care of things, and he did. So that's lesson number 1. People are far more important than your idea, than your money, than the funding that you raise. If you get the right people around you, you're off to a good start. The second story I'm going to tell is about how I find these great people. And this goes back to 2007. Actually, early 2008. And I hired 2 women at the same time, 2 young women. They recently graduated from university. They came for interviews around the same time. One of the women did brilliantly in her interviews. She said all the right things. I walked out of the meeting, I was like, wow, I found the best ever team person. She's going to be amazing. She's going to transform this organization. The other woman, when I left the interview, I was like, I've never seen such a bad interview. She just didn't know how to, the right things to say. And, I was like, we can't hide this woman. But then more thought about, we needed someone to do some data entry for us. So I said, well, she's a college graduate. She can probably do this work. So I said, why don't you come and just do this for a month? And my plan was to ask her to leave after a month. But when all was said and done, what really happened, the person who had blown me away in the interview turned out not to be so great. And a few weeks later, I had to ask her to leave. The person who I thought wasn't going to be, the rock star, turned out to be one of my best employees ever. She just kept her head down, did the work for that 1 month. I said, oh, wow, I'll give her some more work. And she kept impressing me. This woman, within a year, I think I had tripled or quadrupled her salary. She went on to be the head of our admissions program at ALA, the African Leadership Academy in South Africa. And when we were starting ALU, I said, I need you on my team. Please join me. And she joined. She designed our entire admissions process. She was responsible for every single one of the students who are here today. Out of 6,000 applications, she ran the process to select the top 180 who formed the inaugural class from 33 countries. Recently, we had to design our entire brand and create new brochures and marketing material and everything. She ran that whole process. We created a virtual reality experience. She ran that whole process. This is no other than Miss Nicola Hopwood. So thank you, Nicola, for teaching me how to find great people. The lesson I learned there is never to trust interviews when you hire someone. Because when people come to interviews, they tell you what you want to hear. What's your greatest strength? Well, they've got some story that they've had. What's your greatest weakness? They tell you some weakness that isn't really a weakness. And it's always the same. They know the questions you're going to ask them. And so the lesson I learned is that when you hire someone, don't base it on interviews. Rather, give them a task that is similar to what you want them to do on the job. And so ever since Nicola, every other person who joins the organization, yeah, well, they go through an interview, but the only thing I'm trying to get out of the interview is just, do I like you? Will we actually enjoy maybe, having dinner together or something like that? But if you really want to understand whether they can do the job, you need to get them. So if you're going to be a teacher at ALA or you're going to be a faculty member at ALU, then we invite you to actually teach us before you get the job. Liesel, our principal psychologist that you just heard speak, she had to come and actually go through role play as if she was counseling a student. And we watch all that, and then we say, you've got what we need. And that's the big lesson, the second lesson. Don't trust interviews. The third story that I'm going to tell you starts when I was a teenager. We were living in Botswana at the time. I'm originally from Ghana, but we were living in Botswana at the time. And my mother ran a school, and she had a good track record. Sorry, my mother was a teacher at the school. She had a good track record as a teacher. And so the parents in the town came to us and said, we'd like you to start a school for us. But there was one problem. Her husband, my father, had just passed away. I was 16 at the time. And so she said, you know what, I've got so much going on. My husband has just died. I've got these 4 children to look after. They've got to go to college. I can't quit my job and start a school for you guys. But they kept pushing her. So she said, okay, fine. I'll start a study group. She started a small study group with 5 children in a little church building. And she got a couple of teachers and someone to just keep it tiding along. And more parents brought their children. Next thing, we had 25 children in this small church building. By this time, I was 18 and I'd graduated from from high school. And I had a year to wait before I went to university. My mother said, look, this thing's growing. I need you to run the school for me. So she made me the headmaster when I was 18 years old. And I started running this school. For a year, I taught some classes. I managed the other teachers. I dealt with the parents. And then when I'd go home in the afternoon, she'd give me advice about what to do the next day. So fast forward, 10 years later, 27, actually 25. It's not 10 years later, 7 years later. And I had the idea to start the African Leadership Academy. It's going to be a much bigger project. We'll have to raise millions of dollars. Turns out to be we had to raise $100 million. We would have to bring young people from 54 countries across Africa. We would have to coordinate a very complex thing to create a school that would train the future leaders of Africa. Huge project. But you know why I thought I had the confidence to do that? It's because of that very small project I had done when I was 18. That gave me the practice and the confidence that I could do something on a much bigger scale. And then after several years, 10 years of running the African Leadership Academy with 200 students at a time, I had the idea for the African Leadership University, which would be 250,000 students at a time. 25 campuses, much bigger project. The reason I thought I could do that was because of the smaller project I had done when I was, in my early 30s. And so the lesson with all this is start young. Start young and get a lot of practice. If you think about a lot of, this being when I was 18, by the way. If you think about a lot of entrepreneurs who changed the world, they started young. Mark Zuckerberg started a small little project in his dorm room when he was at Harvard, and that became Facebook. Richard Branson was selling magazines in the streets of London, and that became Virgin. The founders of Google started a small computer project at Stanford, and then that changed the world. So many of you now, our students especially, you're working on small projects. It might seem small today, but it's giving you the practice to go and do something much bigger and bigger later in your life. The final story takes me back to about 4 years ago when I was comparing the success we had with 2 of my ventures. African Leadership Academy versus African Leadership Network. The Academy had about 100 employees, was generating about $10 million of revenue a year, and we had raised about $100 million for it. The network had only 15 employees, had only raised $5 million a year, and was struggling to keep it going. And I was wondering, what's going on between these two? Why is this one succeeding so well, and why is this one not doing so well? And so I reflected on my own leadership and management style of these two institutions. And the thing that struck me as the difference was that with the network, I was holding everything close, myself and the co-founder. We didn't have a strong board at all. We didn't empower the board. We didn't empower anyone else in the organization. No one had any chance to make any decisions except us. We wanted to control everything. With the academy, we had empowered people. I had a great team around me. I had given them a lot of responsibility. We had a board that took on a lot of responsibility. They made decisions. And what I realized from these two differences, from these two organizations, is that if you want something to get really big, you have to give it away. People want to co-create something with you. They want to be your partners in building something great. And so you have to empower others and give them a chance to run with things. And that's how things get big. We're attending a TEDx event today. 6 years ago, most of you probably would never have heard of TED. I first heard of TED in 2007 when they did a small conference in Arusha, Tanzania. The first time they'd ever done it in Africa. Before then, TED was a once-a-year conference organized in Monterey, California, for 2,000 people. And it cost $6,000 to attend a TED event. It's a very exclusive, limited product. But what started happening is the first thing they did is they put their talks online. People around the world started seeing these talks. More and more people started learning about it. But then when TED really took off is when they started this concept of TEDx, where they said, you know what? You can organize your own events. They gave it away. And then TED blew up. And now, since then, we've had about 10,000 TEDx events that have been organized around the world. When Apple created a kit that allowed developers to create apps on their App Store, it took the cost down from $1 million to $10,000 to create an app. That's when you had hundreds of thousands of apps being developed. You think about the big successes of our time. Airbnb, they've given you the right to create a hotel in your own home. Uber, they've given away transportation. So you create your own transportation company. And so that's why I'm so excited about what we're going to do with African Leadership University. Because what we've done is we're taking the power away from the faculty, from the administrators in the institution, and we're giving it to our students. And we're saying, you teach each other. You learn by yourself. You create things. You create the magic. This whole event was organized by our students without a single input from any faculty or staff. And every single time we free our students to run things, we see more and more magic. Because what happens when you give things away? You get the power of multiple brains working on your concept. You get hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars of energy and resources working on your concept. Imagine if TEDx of TED was trying to organize all these events on its own. The millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars it would need. We don't even need to hire as many staff as we would have to because we freed our students to run so much about at ALU. And that's why ALU is going to be the biggest of all the things that I've ever done. And so, in closing, all of you in the room, my big challenge to you, especially the young people, is to pursue the path of entrepreneurship. Because in the next 2-3 decades, Africa is going to have the largest workforce in the world. We're going to have a larger workforce than China and India. 1 billion people are going to need jobs in Africa. And the only way we're going to create those jobs is through entrepreneurship. So yes, get a job maybe initially when you get out of college. But eventually you need to become an entrepreneur. And create those millions of jobs that we need in the continent. And as you do so, I hope you find these 4 lessons useful in your own journey. Number 1, people are much more important than your idea or even the funding. If you get the right people around you, the idea will be fixed, the funding will come. Number 2, when you're finding these people, don't trust interviews. Give them a chance to do the job you actually want them to do in a small scale, and then you'll see who really has what it takes. Number 3, make sure you start young and get lots of practice. And don't dismiss the projects you're working on today on a small scale, because it's what's going to give you the practice and the confidence to do something much bigger later on in your lives. And finally, if you want something to get really big, give it away. Thank you.